for melodic heavy metal. Playing it heavier, louder, raunchier, faster. This is the Signals of Intuition.
Hey guys, this is Brandon from the Signals of Intuition and Power Metal Point. The following interview you're going to hear is from December 2014. Right after I did this interview with Carmine, I had a massive computer failure. I thought I had actually lost the interview completely, but I was going through some old USB keys a couple weeks ago and stumbled upon it and was very, very happy because the stories in this interview are just fantastic. We ended up having to do it over 2 sessions simply because there were so many stories that Carmine had, but he's also a busy guy, so we ended up having to do it over, I think, the span of about a week or so. If you're not aware of Carmine's name, and if you're into 70s and 80s rock, I'd be surprised if you don't know his name, but he's drummed with, it feels like, literally everybody. He's played with Rod Stewart for years and helped to write the song Do You Think I'm Sexy? Initially started with Vanilla Fudge in the 1960s, and Vanilla Fudge were very influential on bands like Deep Purple. Led Zeppelin helped to bring them over to America, and he's going to talk about stories like that. He later played in the 80s with King Kobra, which was a supergroup he put together, as well as Blue Murder, which was another supergroup featuring John Sykes of Whitesnake. And through the years, he's just drummed with a number of other people. He's drummed with Paul Stanley, Pink Floyd, Michael Schenker, and the list goes on and on. So without further ado, I present to you my interview from 2014 with Carmine Appice. Hey, Carmine.
Hey, Brandon, how are you, man? I just realized I'm waiting for the call, and I said, you know what? Maybe he's waiting for me to accept him. So I went over there, and I saw it, and I saw you, so there you go. How are you, man?
Oh, I'm doing well. You doing well as too?
Good. Yeah, I'm good. How's Detroit? Cold?
Yes. Yeah, it's freezing. You're what, in L.A.?
I'm in New York, but you're in Jim McCarty territory there.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
So we're working on a new Cactus record as we speak.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's going to be coming out next year. Almost a full album. It's 8 songs, so it'll be an 8-song EP, I guess.
Oh, it's incredible.
Yeah.
Is this still all the original guys, or?
Well, Tim is retired, and Rusty Day is passed away. You know, he got killed a long time ago. And so it's me and Jim, bass player Pete Bramey, that's been in Vanilla Fudge and Cactus since Tim retired. So he's been in Cactus for about 3 years. And we've done some live recording. We went to Japan. We recorded a live CD and then a live DVD with 2 audio CDs with it. All on my label, Rocket Records, distributed by Cleopatra. So he's on those. And then Randy Pratt playing harmonica. He's another guy that's been with us since 2006. But it's really sounds like Cactus, you know. I mean, this guy Pete really plays like Tim, but actually Jim likes him better than Tim because Pete plays the groove more.
Okay, so I guess let's sort of start from the beginning of you as a musician. Where did you grow up, and how did you get involved in music and drumming?
Well, I grew up in Brooklyn, New York. My cousin was a drummer, so he had a drum set in his house. So, you know, we're from an Italian family. So, you know, we'd always go over each other's house for holidays and stuff. And whenever I used to go to his house, I'd jump on his drum set and I'd bang on it. You know, I didn't know what I was doing. I would just bang on it. And then after a while, then I'd go home, you know, and I'd be inspired and I'd take out my mother's pots and pans and spoons and I'd start banging on it. Then my cousin gave me a pair of sticks and I would use, you know, the sticks to bang on the pots and pans. And then my parents thought, well, maybe he's into this. So they bought me, like, for Christmas, like a toy drum set. I was probably 10 years old.
Right.
You know, so I'd bang on it and I'd break them, like, you know, by New Year's they were broken because they were only made of paper at the time. So after I did that for a while, they realized that, hey, you know what, maybe he's really into this. So we went to the first Sam Ash music store and we bought me a real set of drums. My birthday is like December 15th, so I always got Christmas and birthday.
Oh, you're the day after me then.
Oh, yeah? Oh, yeah. Cool.
Yeah, good old right before Christmas, eh?
And I think Ozzy's December 13th, if I remember right. Or it might be Ted Nugent. One of them is December 13th. Yeah, so I'd always get Christmas and birthday presents together. So for this birthday and Christmas, they bought me a little drum set, an actual drum set that was real, but it was cheap. It was only $50, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So I got that, and that was it, you know? So then I started messing around playing with that. And And I just kept playing and playing, until eventually I got good. Then I took lessons and I got another drum set, a real drum set, Then I started playing gigs. My first gig I played in the Bronx, it was a dance. I got $7.50. So that was pretty interesting. Yeah, so it was like kind of building, building blocks.
Right, just steps progressing forward.
And then once I started playing and I took lessons and everything, I started playing more and more gigs, and all through my high school years and junior high, actually, I was probably 13 years old. I started playing gigs. And before you know, when I was 17 years old, I saved enough money to buy a brand new 64 Chevy Super Sport 327 4-speed. When I was 17 years old, I had $1,500 to put down on the car. And then I took the loan out. So there I was, 17 years old, riding around in a brand new Chevy Super Sport.
Was that paid for largely from the gigs that you did at the time?
All from the gigs. And even the payments, my parents co-signed for me, but I made the payments. But I paid for it out of playing, out of drumming. I play weekends. I play weddings and bar mitzvahs and dances. And I was like 17 years old. I was making $200 a weekend.
Right. Oh, gee, that is incredible.
Back then.
Yeah.
Back then,
And so who at this time, who are some of your earliest musical influences?
All the jazz guys. Buddy Rich, Stewart Krupa, Max Roach, Philly Joe Jones, Joe Morello. And then some of the rock things. There was a couple of hit records called Topsy Part 2 by Cozy Cole. Mm-hmm. Let There Be Drums by Sandy Nelson. Those were inspiring. But those were very easy. They were very simple drum parts. I could play those, and I could play better than those,
Yeah.
So when I learned them, but it wasn't like I only learned them to play at the gigs, but I made them sound like the record,
Mm-hmm.
But the main playing came from Buddy Rich, Stewart Krupa, Max Roach, and Joe Morello. Those are my four main guys.
And then do you play any other instruments besides drumming? Like I know you did some singing.
I played. Well, I've been singing doo-wop ever since, before I played drums, actually. In Brooklyn, we used to go down the subways and sing doo-wop 50 songs. My older brother used to do that. He taught me how to sing harmony. So we did that. And then when I started playing, we moved to this one house where I actually had an organ in there. My parents bought an organ for the family. So I started playing the organ. I had the drums in the room and I had an organ in my room. I learned, I was just playing to rock songs on the organ. Then I bought a $50 K guitar. So my older brother played a little guitar. He showed me how to play some chords. And little by little, I played a little on the guitar, a little on the organ. Then in high school, I majored in music. And I actually learned theory and harmony. So I learned what a chord was. I learned how to build any chord on a keyboard.
Right.
I learned how to build a major chord, a minor chord, augmented chords, all that stuff. I learned keys. So I learned, theory and harmony, which really helped me in playing the organ, playing the guitar. So then, I really didn't use that other than screwing around. I actually played one time. I played one gig on the rhythm guitar, which was pretty funny. So I was making mistakes and everything. So I wasn't that proficient on it,
Right.
And when I started making it like with Vanilla Fudge and we started writing arrangements and songs, I started fooling around with songwriting. I wrote my very first song on the organ. So I took the organ with me when I moved out of the house. In 1968, I released a song called Faceless People, where I wrote the lyrics and I wrote everything, the arrangement, the whole thing. And I wrote it all on the organ,
Do you say, just to go back for a second, did you say in high school you had to declare a major? Like you had a major in music?
Yeah, I majored in music back then.
That's interesting.
Well, I actually first went to a vocational school for a year. And while I was there, I was in the orchestra and the band and the marching band. But it was an all-male school, and, I was learning electrical installation, which was, my parents wanted me to have something to fall back on in case the music didn't work out.
Right.
Which made sense. So I did it for them, But when I went for the second year, I didn't like it because the whole first year we did doorbell wiring, they called it. And then the whole second year was the same wiring, but now instead of using doorbells, you're using lights. So I said, oh, man, this is boring. I don't want to do this again with lights. And besides, I was heavily into girls, I mean, like any teenage boy. This was an all-male school. I didn't like it. And every day I would have to go to school. I would pass by this other school that had women in it. And I would pass by and I'd go, man, this sucks. No chicks in the school. So I decided, let me check into this other school. So the school I went to was actually Nugent High School, which is the school that at the beginning of that Welcome Back Carter, that was the school that they showed. That was my high school.
Oh, really? Oh, that's hilarious.
It is. And then, but they had a program there that was you could major in music. So I found out more about it. So basically, they taught you theory and harmony, and I was in the jazz band, I was in the marching band, I was in the orchestra. So I mean, my typical day would be, I'd go into math and social studies, then I'd have theory and harmony, music, then we'd have lunch, then I'd come back and we'd have, we'd start with orchestra, then band, and then I would have like gym, then social studies, then lunch, and then I'd come back, major in music, and then maybe math, and then I'd have like band practice.
Right.
So every day was like, 3 or 4 periods of music, So when I graduated high school, I graduated as, in the yearbook, I was most musically inclined because I was the head of the drum section. I was in all the different bands and everything. I always played at the dances. I was actually a little popular figure. And there was a guy that played trumpet in the marching band. His name was Louis Dadone. He went on to be a big mafia capo.
Really?
Yeah. I found out later that, like, in the last 5 years, that he became this big mafia capo. Is spending life imprisonment now. He was like a football player too.
So, how do you get started, or rather, how does Vanilla Fudge get their start?
Well, it was just like, I was playing around in bands in New York City and New York area, and I was playing in a club called the Choo Choo Club that the Rascals used to play at. And these two guys walk in, and it was Tim Bogut and Mark Stein, and they said, look, we have a band called the Pigeons. We'd like to see if you want to join us. We're trying to make it on the record business. At that time, I wasn't really into being a rock star. I was into doing like my drum teacher did, playing weekends, playing 4 nights a week, making a big living. He made a big living.
Right.
Yeah, he made like $1,000 a week in the 60s.
Jeez.
Which was good money back then. He had a Cadillac, he had his own house, 2-family house, he had his finished basement with his drum room downstairs. I said, that's all I wanted to do. That was fine with me. But when they came in and said, we want to try and make it in the record business, we have a manager on Long Island that's going to put us on salary, and we're just going to work until we can try and make it. And that was like a whole different concept for me. And I said, oh, wow, let me think about that. So I had to actually think about it. So I did think about it, and I said, you know what, I'll do it. So I went and did it. And when I did it, 9 months later, we had a hit record on it. We had to keep hanging on the charts. I'd always say to those guys, see, I joined you, and look what happened.
So how do you guys sort of come up with this psychedelic rock sort of sound? Because from what I understand, you guys were one of sort of the pioneering bands at the time, correct?
Well, what it was is basically we were doing this trend that was going around Long Island. It was started by the Vagrants, who actually started it as an offshoot of the Rascals. And what it was called production numbers. And the production numbers were basically these big productions on songs, these 3-minute songs stretched out, slowed down, made them more dramatic with lights and everything. Mm-hmm. So we were doing the same thing. Also around was Leslie West was in the Vagrants. Billy Joel was in the Hassles. They were a group.
Oh, wow.
So we were all doing that same style. We were the first ones to make it out of that because we had some great voices. Mark Stein is a tremendous singer. We all sang. We all had this vibrato. We sound like a bunch of black guys, Mm-hmm. So we just went on with it, and we hit it lucky. We had the manager. The manager was connected to the mafia, actually.
Oh, really?
Connected to Goodfellas. We used to see Henry Hill come around to our house, and he would say, "Hey, I got some stuff. It just fell off a truck," and open up the trunk of his car and sell us a bunch of stuff, And he would work at the manager's club. I think in the movie where they burned that club down, I think that was my manager's club.
Oh, geez.
Yeah. And we used to go to Paulie, the Don. We used to go to his house. I mean, it was really heavy stuff back then, So we made it. I think partly due to that help, the mafia help there. We were like a mafia band, just like Tommy James,
Yep.
And so we made it. We had a hit record. And next thing we know, we were going to the West Coast and play, and we were getting on television shows, and our manager was still paying us a salary, and he put out money for equipment. We owed him like $50,000 in equipment. We needed an organ, we needed another Leslie, we need PA system, whatever we needed. he went out and bought.
Oh, that's unreal.
Yeah, so then we went on the road and we went to the West Coast and we were having a ball. We were all on a salary. We didn't know what we were spending. We were all on salaries, and we come back from a 4-week tour and we got, a bunch of money and checks laying there and all our bills paid. We had an accountant, like that Joe Walsh song, I have accountants pay for it all.
Yeah.
And still, I never made a mortgage payment in my life.
That's incredible.
I own a lot of properties and stuff through my life, and I never made a mortgage payment ever.
Mm-hmm. And from what I understand, Led Zeppelin, like in the late 60s, toured with you guys?
They opened up for us, not even toured with us. We put them on the first bill on a show that we didn't really need. We didn't really need them on the show. It was already sold out.
Right.
Because it was sold out, we didn't need them. Now, the promoter, his name is Barry Fay, he told me the story. He said, I don't know if you know this or not, but you guys paid half of Led Zeppelin's fee that night.
Huh.
I said, no, I didn't know that. So they got $1,500. We paid $750 of it.
That's incredible.
So, isn't that incredible? Amazing.
So what ultimately led to the breakup of that band?
Well, basically, the music was changing, 60s psychedelic kind of stuff, the more blues rock, heavy blues, rock, guitar-oriented stuff. And, we could feel the difference in the record sales and the vibe. So, and then all supergroups were sort of becoming very, very in. It was like the end thing, break a couple of groups, and put a supergroup together. Like Blind Faith did, and Mountain did, West Bruce and Lang, and that kind of thing. So we were sort of involved in that thing by, at the time, we had heard Jeff Beck wanted to play with me and Tim. So we basically, actually John Bonham told us that.
Really?
Yeah, we were at a gig we did in '69, and we were the headline band, and it was 10 years after Jeff Beck group, Edwin Hawkins Singers, right? So as Edwin Hawkins Singers opened up, and then Jeff Beck group. Then 10 years after, then the Jeff Beck group, and then us. So just as Jeff Beck group went on, Led Zeppelin went up there and actually jammed with the Jeff Beck group. So.
Oh, that's crazy.
Yeah, that was crazy. And they were jamming. John Bonham went up to play Tony Hymas' drums, who was with Jeff at the time. After that Led Zeppelin thing went on with Jeff Beck, I mean, come on, how do you follow that? Led Zeppelin was like the hottest.
It's pretty tough.
Band. They were the hottest band in the world at that point. They were coming up so fast. That we were getting ready to go on, and John Bonham came over and said, Jeff Beck wants to play with you and Tim. He loves you and Tim. I said, really? I mean, we had jammed with Jeff in England, screwing around, because, he was a friend of ours.
Oh, had you?
Yeah.
How'd you guys first come to meet him?
We met him in London, at this place called the Speakeasy. And actually, it was even before that. In fact, that's when we initially met him. We had done a Coca-Cola commercial, Coke. Mm-hmm. Things go better with Coca-Cola, that thing, And Vinnie Martell, our guitar player, was sick that day, really sick. He couldn't get out of bed. So, being that we had the same attorney as the Jeff Beck group, Jeff was in town, and we actually got Jeff Beck to play on a Vanilla Fudge Coke commercial. So that was the first time we played together. And then after that, when we went to London and England and stuff, Jeff would come around and hang out with us, and me and Tim, and we would go down to Speakeasy and we'd have a jam. And same thing when we were Cactus, we'd go meet him, because he was supposed to originally be in Cactus,
Oh, was he?
Yeah, so the idea was to get, when we heard that, we got Jeff Beck. It was going to be Jeff Beck, me, Tim Bogert, and Rod Stewart. That was going to be a new super group, okay? And that would have been pretty amazing. But Rod didn't want to work with Jeff. They had some financial problems going on. And then just as we were ready to get together with Jeff, we figured we'll get another singer. Jeff was in England and got in this famous car wreck that he got into, which put him back 2 years. In those 2 years, we did Cactus because, we had broken up Vanilla Fudge. And back in those days, once you break a band up, you sort of stay there.
Right.
Which we should have actually used Vanilla Fudge as a ship and gone off and done side projects and then get back together and continue. Because after BBA, we had a deal on Epic Records for a fairly big deal, and the band was still a good-sized name in 70, 73, 74. But then that didn't work out either. We had some problems, internal problems with band members and stuff. So But anyway, that's pretty much why the Vanilla Fudge broke up.
And so you sort of already alluded to this, but in the late 70s, you joined Rod Stewart. How did you come to join him?
Well, that was funny because we had played with the Cactus. So because Rod wasn't in Cactus, and Jeff wasn't in Cactus, that was going to be the band that had Rod and Jeff in it. We already had the name. It was going to be Cactus, blah, 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 blah. So then when Jeff didn't make it, we started Cactus, me and Tim. And we got Jim McCarty and Rusty Day. Jim was from Buddy Miles Express at the time and was with the Detroit Wheels before that. Then Rusty Day was with Ted Nugent and the Amboy Dukes. So it was sort of like a super group, but not as big as it would have been with Jeff and Rod. So we did 2 years of that. And then we toured with Rod Stewart and the Faces, like 45 shows maybe, if not more, in 71. We played Madison Square Garden, played all the big arenas all over the country. And so we got to be fairly good buddies, all of us, We used to wreck hotel rooms together and screw around with groupies together, and it was just a good time. So I was in L.A. I moved to L.A. in 1976. I bought a house because the East Coast, after BBA, the manager I had got more into promoting as a promoter. His name was Phil Bastille. He was also connected to the Mafia, I think I mentioned at one point. So he had this big promotion company, Concert Seats. I mean, if you look at the Song Remains the Same, that was his gig. He promoted. At the end of the movie, you see two guys. One was our attorney, and heavier guy was Phil. He was our manager. He was a, very scary-looking guy, And so anyway, he got into more of the concert thing, and the management thing was sort of going down the shitter, So I had gone to the West Coast to see what was going on. I had an offer to join a band with Mike Bloomfield, and I took a friend of mine, Rick Gretsch, the bass player for Family and Blind Faith, with me. And we went out there real low-key, stayed at my older brother's house, and then we joined this band, KGB. So I was out there, and I decided to move there. So once I moved there, I was there. So I was doing this. I think I was doing the second KGB album when a friend of mine, San Gennaro, who I knew out there as a drummer, I said, "Hey, how you doing? What's up?" And he said, "Well, I just auditioned for Rod Stewart's group." I go, "Oh, really? Cool. How'd it go?" He goes, "I'm not good. I didn't get it." I said, "Oh, okay, that's cool." So he said, "Why don't you talk to them?" I said, "Oh, I didn't even know he was looking for a drummer." So I said, "Who are you dealing with?" He said, "Pete Buckland." I said, "Oh, Pete Buckland's that's the tour manager. I know him well, Because we did all that stuff on the road. Then we met him in London a few times when I was there with Cactus, and we were all good buddies. I called Pete and I said, he was in L.A. and I had his, Santa gave me his number and I called him. I said, "Pete, it's Carmine. We're looking for a drummer. You don't call me." He said, "Well, you're always busy." I said, "Well, I'm not busy now. I would love to play with Rod,
Right.
He's one of my favorite singers, so. Next thing I know, he called Rod, and the funny thing was, Rod called back and told Pete to tell me to check out the band. They were rehearsing there, to see if I like it. I thought that was pretty wild,
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't like an audition. It was like me auditioning the band, I went to Rod's house, and I was just blown away at Rod's house because, I had like a house I had bought. It was like a $100,000 house in L.A., It was 3,000 square foot, 1924 kind of old Spanish villa. It was a beautiful house, When I pulled up to his house, my house was like the guest house in his house. I was blown away. I said, "Oh my God, look at this place." It was like a palace, And I was just blown away. So when I pulled up there, I had a couple of cool cars. I had a Pantera and a Jaguar at the time.
Oh, nice.
And my Jaguar looked like a big old Rolls Royce, So I pulled up in the Pantera. It'd be cool, then I pull up and there's, Rod's car collection, Maseratis and Lamborghinis and Porsches and everything, And I said, "Wow, this is unbelievable. I didn't know Rod had this kind of money." I should have. I mean, the guy was playing arenas for fucking, how many years? 5 years,
Goes to show you what being a rock star in the 70s paid off like, eh?
Unbelievable, So anyway, I went down, I played with the band. I knew some of the guys in the band. Phil Chen had played with me. I originally, after BBA, I went to England for a while, and I played with Jeff Beck, and I got Jeff into that whole instrumental jazz rock thing. when we were on the road, I would play my Vision Orchestra and Billy Cobham albums and 11th House, all these instrumental jazz rock records, and I got Jeff into it. And then we ended up recording an album. And we didn't know if it was going to be a Beck Appice album or a Jeff Beck album. That album ended up being Blow by Blow. So I was on five or six of the tracks on that. Then we couldn't work out a financial and a billing deal. So I ended up leaving, according to my manager and that attorney. He said, you better off playing with Jeff. You came out of an equal band Jeff Beck project. You don't want to go into a Jeff Beck project as a sideman.
Right.
Would be good for your career. So they said, you'd be better off not playing on that record. So I blew it out. I co-wrote 3 songs. I got screwed out of it. I worked with George Martin for like 2.5, 3 weeks.
Wow.
Which was amazing. And then the album comes out and sells 2 million copies. And I'm there going, great. Here it is. I get Jeff into this thing. I'm on the album. Now I'm off the album. The album comes out and goes huge, right? And I got it up the S. So anyway, so Phil Chen was on that album. And so I played with Phil before. And this guy, Jim Cregan, who I knew from England at the same time when I was in England working with Jeff on this album. I was doing other things for fun. I played at the London Palladium with John Lord and Tony Ashton and Ian Pace and myself. And Jim Cregan was the guitar player on the project. So we rehearsed for about a week. And then we did this gig that was recorded live and all that. So I'd known Jim Cregan also. Then the other guys I didn't know. Gary Granger I didn't know. Billy Peake I didn't know. And John Jarvis, keyboard player, I didn't know. So I went in and we played. We all had a great time. And then Pete said, so what do you think? I said, yeah, sounds good. I'm thinking, sure, I want to play with Rod Stewart, because he's the greatest voice, the greatest frontman, So anyway, I basically joined the band, and Rod came back and said to me, well, look, I know you want a solo, you have fans out there, so I'll give you a solo every night, and just play like you did in Cactus, and we'll be great. And then the band ended up actually having a percentage of the road, it was a band, it was really a band.
No, that's amazing.
So that went on from 76 to the end of 81. Like actually 5, 6 good years.
That's great. What were the circumstances that led you to leave Rod Stewart?
Yeah, it was a lot of weird stuff. This guy, Jim Cregan, was very jealous of the fact that I was like second in command of the band. Name-wise, you had Rod's name, and I was the biggest name after Rod,
Mm-hmm.
And he didn't like that. He kept pushing. On the last album I did, the one with Young Turks, which I co-wrote, I was supposed to be a co-producer, and I didn't go out and do the cocaine and the drinking and all that, so I was never into cocaine or drinking. And the guys that were in Rod's ears were the guys that did the cocaine and the drinking.
Right.
So at the time, we had brought Tony Brock in to do some drums at the request of Jim Cregan, and he was always in Rod's ear, and even now he's one of Rod's godfathers to one of Rod's kids. We used to call Jim the Fox, the friend of the stars. Because anytime somebody new would come in, Billy, it would be like Elton John or Paul McCartney or something. He was right on him, So long story short, all that stuff, the plans, they started having a click, and then before I know it, my production credit was gone. And then, I noticed I felt myself being sort of isolated,
Right.
And I brought in Jay Davis and Danny Johnson into the band. And there was this sort of like American versus English thing going on with the band,
Oh.
And then one day before we would go on tour, they said that Rod said this rumor's going on, they're going to join Led Zeppelin, so you can go do that, and we're going to use Tony Brock on the tour, which really pissed me off, because those rumors were non-true, and he knew that, but that's cool. And we ended up making a settlement, and we ended up being friends, and then I ended up hooking Jeff Beck and him up to do People Get Ready, which I got screwed on again.
Oh, that's unreal. Around that time,
Yeah.
one of the things I really dug that you did was Paul Stanley's solo album, the song "Take Me Away." How did you come to join that?
Well, Paul, I've known Paul since, let me see, it was 1975, I think it was. when they were doing their first big tour, and I was asked to replace Corky Lang with the Leslie West Band to open up for Kiss on this tour. At the time, they were just getting big. This was their first arena tour, and so we were the open act, and I got to meet Paul and Gene and Peter, and they were all like fans of mine from Cactus and BBA and all that stuff. So we got to be friends, and then through the years we sort of kept in touch, and then it was like 1976, 77, probably 77 we're looking at, when I was in Rod's band. I think we played the Forum somewhere, and Paul and some of his guys came down. So naturally, I knew them. So Rod and those guys didn't know them. I knew them, and I said hi, hung out with them. I hung out with Paul's, and Paul had moved to L.A. So we exchanged numbers, and we started hanging out a little more. And then at that point in time, I said to Paul, I got to find a manager because I want to do other stuff on the side of Rod, like a solo album, and just do this and do that. So Paul said, I'm going to hook you up with my manager if you want to, Bill Aucoin. And Bill Aucoin did a tremendous job with Kiss, as we all know. So he basically gave me Paul's number, gave me Bill's number. I did the call. Bill had this guy, Alan Miller, working for him on the West Coast. So we, had a meeting, and his initial words to me were, look, everybody knows you're a great drummer, you're a rock star, you've been around, but now we're going to make you a personality, And I said, what do you mean personality? He said, we're going to make you a celebrity now. I said, really? Okay, how do you do that? He goes, watch me. I said, okay. So basically, they hired a couple of publicists. They had an in-house publicist. And before you know it, I was on all these magazines. I was in all these radio shows, television shows. When I went to England with Rod, I had a publicist working it for me. Anything that happened on the road, I'd feed to him. It would be on newspapers around the world. I mean, even had a fight at the Speakeasy. It made newspapers all around the world, And I watched him build my name into this celebrity kind of thing where after he was done, I noticed that press people were calling me instead of me calling them, So it was lost. He did a great job. But then, so it was 1978, and Paul was doing his album, and he said, I'd love for you to play on some of the tracks. I said, okay. So I just come in from, it must have been with Rod. I was in Asia, and I just flew in from Asia. And I was so fried at the session. So I think I went right from the airport to the studio, And a flight from Asia was like 13 hours, So it was kind of a rough one. And I remember recording Jeff Klicksman, the producer, and Paul was there. And we did 4 or 5 songs. And then when the album came out, it was only, it only ended up being 1 song. But the 1 song that was on there, everyone told me was the best song on the album.
It was. That's one of my favorite of their solo songs. Yeah, it was a great tune.
Yeah, so, and funny things happened with that album. As I went on and did clinics throughout my career, even like in the 90s, I remember one run I did, and one kid said to me, what were the fills you played on that song that you did with Paul Stanley? What was it called? Take Me Away, right? So I said, tell you the truth, I haven't heard that song in ages. I don't remember what I did. I don't remember the song. I said, if I heard the song, I could tell you. So he said, well, I happen to have a cassette in my car. So the guy brought out, it was a cassette, and we played it, and I remember I showed it. The next day, the next clinic, another guy asked the same question. So now I had an idea of it. And basically, 4 days in a row, I had that question. In mid-90s, I mean, it was like, 18 years after I did it. But it was pretty funny. But funny thing is, the thing went gold and platinum. I never got the gold and platinum record for that. I keep saying to myself, I'm going to order one and get it, add it to my bunch. But I never did it. But I think I'm going to do that because it really is a milestone, sort of like the Pink Floyd one I did,
Right. I was just about to ask you about that one. So let's sort of jump ahead about a decade. And how did you come to play on Dogs of War?
Well, that was basically Bob Ezrin. He left a message on my phone machine at the time, and it was like, Carmine, it's Bob Ezrin, how are you? He said, I'm producing this band that's screaming for Carmine drum fills. He said, give me a call, and he left his number. So I called him up. I said, "Hi, Bob, Carmine, how are you? Good. Who's the band?" He says, "Pink Floyd." I said, "Pink Floyd?" I said, "What happened to Nick?" He goes, "Oh, Nick's there." He said, "Nick, yeah, but Nick is like, Nick is sort of like, calluses are soft. He's been racing his cars." I said, "He's going to be there?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "Okay." So he said, "So come on down, and we worked out a price. And we said, "Let's do it." So I had my roadie bring my drums down there, and there's Tony Levin, David Gilmour, the keyboard player, I forgot his name, and Nick, Bob Ezrin, the engineer, Renee M Studios, huge studio, and they had the song on Dogs of War on a 4-track with a click track. And what they did was they just kept recording me all day long. I recorded on so many, tracks. It filled up, I believe, like 4. When you run a tape at, I think it's the 15 IPS, you can get 30 minutes out of it. So I had like 4 of those tapes filled up, 24 tracks filled up with drum parts.
And it was just the one song they had you do?
Yeah, I just did that one song. So I'm like, okay. And then every time I asked Bob, I kept asking Bob, I said, "Bob, so what's the track like?" He said, and they always give me like these one-word answers. Amazing. What's the drum part? Because I never heard them, put the drum part together. Because it was, all different. Took a take from this one and put a take from that one. It was like, that's how they worked back then.
Yeah, must have been an insane amount of work. You're trying to just compile all that just for drums.
Oh, it was incredible. I mean, it took them months, and week after week, I'd call and say, "What is going on? What's it sound like?" And he'd say, "Well, in one word, daring." In one word, amazing. In one word, high energy. Just crazy stuff. So I never really heard it until it came out.
Right.
And I was in Hamilton, Canada. I was doing this crazy underground movie called Black Roses. I ended out doing the soundtrack. And then they wanted me, the director who just died in July, I didn't know it, this guy, John Fasano, he just passed away in July. They said, "Look, we love the soundtrack, so we need a drummer, somebody to play the drummer in the band in the movie. We'd love for you to do it." So I said, "Sure." So it was good money, flew me up first class, picked me up on limos, first class flights to Toronto, and then limousine to Hamilton, first class stuff. So I remember I was in the hotel there, and in all those hotels in Canada, they always have the underground malls because of the snow.
Right.
So I had heard that Pink Floyd came out that day downstairs, and there was a record store. Remember those?
Yeah.
There was a record store down there, and I went down there, and I bought a cassette of the album. And I put the cassette on my Walkman, and I listened to the track, and I was just blown away at what they did.
Was it really, really different from what you recorded?
Well, I mean...
Or what you played onto the click track versus the final product?
I don't remember. I remember. I played it so many times, It was the same. Every time I played it, it was similar, the way I played it. Whenever I play stuff, I mean, if I do fills, they're always a little different, but similar. So, when I heard it, I said, "Wow, sounds great." And then I got, the gold and platinum record. I could have gotten, 5 times gold and 3-4 times platinum, but I didn't go that far. I just got the gold and platinum. If I want to get the 5 times gold, I can still get one. There's a place in New Jersey I get records from. You pay X amount of dollars. They have to clear it with the band. Like for my projects, Vanilla Fudge, BBA, it's easy. Well, to get the Rod Stewart ones, I had to clear it with Rod. So they got a signed letter from Rod saying that I can get these gold and platinum records, And they got one from Pink Floyd. So I would have anything from Stanley. He'd have to sign a letter to me for me saying that I'm allowed to get the gold and platinum record.
That's unreal. I didn't know you had to go through that. I just thought the label just kind of sent it to you.
Well, they do mostly, but for some reason, we never got any from the Paul thing. And sometimes when you're a sideman on a session, like Pink Floyd, really they don't just give it to you.
Right. Just sort of stepping back in time now again. In the early 80s, you played on Ted Nugent's album. Was that a session gig, or were you involved with the writing and sort of as a member of the band?
Well, I was a member of the band, but with Ted, you never really got involved with the writing. Ted took total control of it all. He did go out to California to a studio I recommended, but in the end, neither him or me liked the drum sound we got there. So I ended up going in there and working with the studio and changing the whole drum sound. And that studio was Pasha Records. Remember them from the 80s? They had Quiet Riot.
Right, yep.
Right, and I went in with this guy, Dwayne Barron, the engineer, and I changed the whole drum sound of the studio to, a bigger, more Carmine kind of drum sound, because what we got when we went out there with Ted was a bit LA sounding. It didn't have that ambience. It didn't have that big kick-ass sound. That was probably one of the last records I ever did that didn't, And so the first record that they released with that drum sound from that studio was a freaking Quiet Riot record, right? Which did 5 million albums. So I used to tell Frankie Benelli, well, you got that hit record using my drum sound. Thank you. Yeah. It's amazing how many things I was involved in that I got screwed on. You know what I mean? I should call my next book that I write. I just wrote the book of my life. We're working on a deal now. The next one's going to be called Screwed. and I'll just tell the stories, all the stories that I got screwed out of stuff on.
That's incredible.
Actually, that's not a bad idea, is it?
No, it's not.
A bad idea, right?
Show people the less glamorous side of the music business.
Yeah, exactly. I might do that. But anyway, so I went out and I played with Ted. We went out and we did a whole summer tour. We had a great time. He paid us all well. And it was Derek St. Holmes, me, Ted, and this guy Dave Kizwini was the bass player at the time, And but it was a great fun tour. We were playing arenas still. That's when Ted was still playing arenas. I don't know why we never hooked up again. But then until a few years later, one of my managers called Ted's manager and say, Carmine and Ted had such a great time together, touring. It was a great match, Carmine would draw in people, added to Ted's audience, and it was a great match. And then the manager said, well, Carmine is sort of like Ted. He's not really a side man. He's more of a leader, So he's better, he does his own things. He has his own record deals. He has publicists. I mean, most drummers don't have that,
Right.
They just come in and they play. So that's a drag. So, Buddy Rich told me that, He said, it's funny, you, as a drummer, you build up your name to the point where a lot of people know you, you figured out how to help you. But then none of the big stars call you to play with them anymore.
It figures you're sort of too big.
So you end up playing your own gigs. Yeah. Meanwhile, your singers, and in our case, singers and guitar players will be playing big theaters and arenas, and drummers will end up playing in a 500-seat club or a small theater, 500 seats, And Buddy Rich was very resentful about that. But I see what he's talking about. I'm the same age he was when he told me that, and it's the same kind of thing, If I don't do my own things, like doing the Drum Wars thing and putting my own stuff together, I don't really get calls from big acts to play with them because they can get a young guy to play for cheap.
Right. So one of my favorite bands that you were involved with was King Kobra. How did this band come to be?
Well, after Sharon Osbourne fired me off funny enough, she fired me off the Ozzy tour.
Okay, actually, you know what? Let's step back then and talk about Ozzy, and then we'll go into King Kobra.
Okay. Well, Ozzy I found Ozzy, I knew Ozzy. First gig, Black Sabbath, one of the first gigs they did in America was with Black Sabbath, Cactus, and the opening act was Steel Mill that had Bruce Springsteen in it. How about that? Isn't that funny?
Oh, yeah.
So we could say Bruce Springsteen opened up for Cactus. That's amazing. Yeah. Anyway, so I knew Ozzy from back then. And then, so it was probably, 1983, I believe it was. I was a spokesperson for Mattel Electronics, Mattel Sensonics Drums, it was called. And I was in Europe, in France. Actually, I was in Cannes, France, right on the water there. I was doing a convention for them. I was there for a week. At the time, my wife at the time was with me, and we were hanging out in Cannes, France, and having a great time. And then my manager called on the hotel phone and said, look, Sharon Osbourne's looking for you. I said, what did I do? She goes, I don't know, but it sounds like they want you to join Ozzy. I said, really? Because I just finished Ted. We were doing a new Vanilla Fudge album. I had done an album with Rick Derringer called DNA, Derringer and Appice.
Yep.
I had been to, it's all after Rod. I'd been to Japan. I put a super group together. We played the Budokan. I was doing great. I was making all the big royalties from Sexy and Young Turks. I was having a great old time, And so then Ozzy called, and they wanted me to meet them in London, because they were in London. So they arranged a flight for me. I met them in London, and we had a play. And then we went to the pub, and we talked and hung out with Sharon and Ozzy. And I known Sharon and Ozzy, and I known Sharon from her father, Don Arden, which they used to manage Black Sabbath. My brother was in that, and blah, 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 So I basically was talking to them, and, and I told both of them that I'd love to join it. I'd love to become involved in production and songwriting and everything else that I do, help you with a killer drum sound for your records and go on the road and, and be in the band like I was with Rod for 6 years, And they were both in agreement. And I said, when I go to America, I do these master classes. I have a publicist. I do everything I can to help sell tickets and blah, blah, blah. In We magazine, it was like like a Playboy. At one point, in 82, 83, they had a time when they would put rock bands in there. So they had Motley Crue was in there, and they had pages with chicks, Ozzy was in there, and I was in there myself as, Rod Stewart's drummer. And, I had 13 pages with me in bed with these two chicks with their tits out and blah, 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 So, but it goes to show you the power of what Bill Aucoin was saying. He built me to that point. In the 80s, I was on the front cover of all these magazines, and I didn't even have a hit record. But it was just from my past and the celebrity that they were building. So anyway, I told them, look, I know Ozzy was in that magazine, I'm in that magazine, so I do get a lot of press. And they said, oh, that's great. So in the long run, when we did the European tour, it was great. We went to America. I started doing master classes, doing 5 a week. They were selling out 50 people a show, and I was getting a lot of press. I was giving money to UNICEF from that, plus I was playing arenas at night. Motley Crue was our opening band. And it was a human interest story, so I got a lot of press. And basically, she didn't like that. So also on MTV, J.J. Jackson would say, here's a Ozzy tour featuring legendary drummer Carmine Appice. She didn't like that. So long story short, when we played Houston, she fired me.
Jeez.
Right? So she said, your name is too big. You need to start your own band. So she fired me, okay? So we had a lawsuit, we settled that, and then I went on and started my own band. I started King Kobra.
And how did you sort of put that whole band together?
Well, basically, I had started while I was with Ozzy, because when these kind of bands with Rod, you go out and you do a year's tour, and then you got 6 months off, So I figured, well, when I have the time off, I'm going to do a solo thing. So I had found a Mark Free in L.A. Somebody turned me on to him. And I thought he was a great singer. So I was already working on some demos with him, okay? For my manager, Alan Miller, who worked for Bill Aucoin, to get a record deal for me, So that was already in the works. So when she fired me, I went back, back home with my tail between my legs and my manager, and I said, I don't know what the hell I'm going to do. I was hooked into Pasha Records. They released my solo album they did. After I left Rod, funny enough, I had a solo album released on his label. Pretty wild, right? Because it was already made for, it was paid for in emotion and everything. So it came out on his label, but in America it came out on Pasha. So I was already hooked in with the whole Pasha thing. So Spencer Prophet, who produced The Quiet Ride, he produced the Vanilla Fudge record we did, produced the DNA record. I put him as executive producer on my solo record. He said, look, I can help you get a deal once you get this new band together. So we did some demos, and on the demos we did, before we even had the full band, I had the concept of the look, because, back then it was all about look too. My concept was to get a good-looking band of guys that played, young guys that played their asses off, so the guys would like them because they're playing, and the girls would like them because they're good-looking,
Yeah.
And then I had the idea to do the opposite of Motley Crue, where you had 3 black-haired guys and a blonde lead singer. I had all blonde guys with me being the black-haired guy with colors on my hair. So we used to call those Cobra colors and spelled them with 2 Ks. So I created this comic book looking band, for the mid 80s. But we were good players. Unfortunately, so we signed a deal with Capitol, a 2-record deal, but they didn't know what they were doing. They didn't know how to break the band. And that's basically what happened. And then when they learned to break a band, they just signed Poison. And Poison really took our image to the next step. They looked just like women, but they couldn't play. I mean, the only player in there was Cece, a bit, but he wasn't even, up to the status. And they all got better over years. I mean, even Ricky Rocket's better now. And he's become more of a drummer, Before, back then, he was more about what he looked like,
What sort of changed between the second and third album, other than the fact that you guys added J.K. Northrup to the band and King Kobra?
Well, we had the whole band broke up basically, except for me and Dave. Johnny Rod
was that. Did you guys lose your deal at that after the second record?
Yeah, we lost the deal. We could have got another deal, but being that the band broke up, Johnny Rod left to join Wasp. Mark Free didn't want to sing heavy metal, hard rock anymore. And so it was me, Dave, and Mick, basically. So we got this guy, Lonnie Vincent. His name was Lonnie Miller. I said, look, you can't have the same name as the manager. His name is Alan Miller. So let's go, what's your middle name? He says, Vincent. I said, how about we call you Lonnie Vincent? I said, okay. Then we had Mark Tureen, who was around the LA scene, So we had those 2 guys join us. So we were rehearsing every day with King Cobra. I rented a rehearsal place. We did demos and we wrote songs. Then before you know it, Lonnie, Mick, and Mark left. They had another drummer. This guy that did our merchandise gave me a huge deal of merchandise. Took those 3 guys and put them with another drummer and got a deal for them as the Bullet Boys on Warner Brothers.
Oh.
So after they left, me and Dave were left by ourselves. So my friend Dwayne Hitchings, who was my co-writer on a lot of songs and great keyboard player, he was working with this group called Northrop from up north. And basically we were talking to Jeff, and he had a bass player and a singer, Johnny Edwards, that was with Northrop. And we said, well, why don't we just move you guys right into the slot? So we did King Cobra 3, which was released on my label, Rocker Records, back then. And which is the label I just rejuvenized lately. And we released King Cobra 3, and it did okay. We did a video, we sold a bunch of records. We were on Headbangers Ball, on MTV, and we got a deal in Europe. But the company I was working with, New Renaissance Records, they were a small label. They were distributed by Relativity, and instead of paying Relativity, never paid them any money. They paid them in returns, So we sold 30 or 40, I think it's about 30,000, 40,000 records with that back in those days. And I never got a dime because they never got any money from the label. So then after that, I joined Blue Murder, and we were recording the Blue Murder record, and I just sort of said, well, it's time to go,
Right. Speaking of that record, I think for me that might be my favorite thing you've played on. Like that first record was just
Blue
incredible.
Murder?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was, and it was hard to get that together because I saw Blue Murder coming together, and Cozy Powell was the drummer, and I was really pissed I said, Cozy gets all these freaking good gigs, good bands, Sabbath and Whitesnake, I said, he played with all these good bands. Then I heard Cozy was out. Then I heard they auditioned Ainsley Dunbar and this one and that one, and all these guys were out. So I actually went to England looking for Blue Murder. Okay, and I went to when my brother Vinny played with Dio 4 nights at Hammersmith. I said, anyone that's going to know how to get a hold of Blue Murder is going to be at that gig. And sure enough, I did meet Chris Wells, a writer. He turned me on to the number. I called up. I went down to see him. I met Tony that night at the hotel in Blackpool, England. I drove up there from London. We played together, and that was it. Once we played, it was magic. We said, wow. They said, if you want in, you're in. He said, you got it. So we never heard a drummer play so many different drum fills. So it was good, and it was magic. It was a great and amazing band. I just looked at a YouTube of our show. I don't know if you ever saw that, of our show from Tokyo.
No, is there like a
YouTube?
pro shot like on TV concert?
No, not pro, but good enough where you can see what's going on. But it's awesome. The band is so freaking powerful and so tight. It blew me away. You know, I tried to get a reunion with Blue Murder for 12 years, and in 2012 I gave up. You know, we just couldn't get John to commit to do it. You know, me and Tony were in there. We even went to his house one day, and we played Blue Murder songs. And having not played them for 20 years, we just played them. We said, "Okay, Valley of the Kings." We rattled it off and we played it. It was like 85% there. You know.
Yeah.
You know, it was like riding a bike, you know, to go back. and I know if we ever did do that, the fans would come out in droves to see it, because everywhere I go, I get asked to, you know, when's Blue Murder going to come out and do another tour? We really did one tour, you know.
What was it like working with Bob Rock and Mike Frazier on that record?
Well, you know, that was the first record Bob produced. The other records he was engineered on. You know, Bon Jovi and Aerosmith. So
Right.
it was very tedious. They were very, you know, like when John doubled the guitars, he had to double the guitar, every inflection, everything. You know, I recorded the drums, I think 2 or 3 times, because every time, once we got going, I did all the tracks, and then we said, you know what, the drums sound a lot better now. So we did the whole thing again. I think it was twice we did it. So I did the whole record again. And we took real care to make sure, if you listen to that record, all the drum fills on that record, there's not one repetition drum fill. They're all different.
Really?
Because, you know, at that time, from 1982 on, I was recording drums differently. I was recording to a click, and I would punch in and out just like a guitar or a bass player would do, you know, which was a new technique in those days. Because, you know, you have to know what cymbal you ended on, you have to keep the energy going from where you were, and I was able to create the drum part rather than just play with the band. So basically, it was, you know, it was like a definite experience. So Bob was very meticulous in getting all these parts right. You know, I brought up so many drums up there with me. So Bob was the producer, and Mike Frazier was the engineer. I didn't know Mike Frazier that well at the time or his history. But when we started mixing the stuff, that's when we started seeing, you know, that Mike was amazing too, you know.
Now, is it true? I mean, I don't know how much of the band's early history you were a part of, but is it true you guys had like Tony Mills and Ray Gillen and Tony Martin as some of the potential singers?
Well, when I joined, it was Tony Martin was supposed to be in the band. And then when we actually were ready to get on the plane to go to Vancouver, he didn't get on the plane. He blew at that time. So we didn't know what to do. We already shipped our drums up there, equipment, roadies were up there ready. So we didn't know what to do. So we said, you know what? Bob said, just come anyway. We'll do the tracks, and then we'll take a break, and then we'll find a singer. So that's what we did. In that break, he did the Cult record. And we went down back to LA, and we auditioned singers. We left and right. You know, we auditioned everybody, you know. And Joel Turner told me he would have been the singer for the band, but at the time there was something going on between him and Sykes that prevented it, you know. And that would have been amazing, you know, having Joe sing with us, you know. But it ended up, you know, we couldn't find anybody, and I had told John, I said, look, you did the demos, I got the deal, singing, why don't you just sing, and me and Tony lined you know, we'll be like the Cream. Be like a trio, you know. So that's what we did. So John ended up singing, ended up doing a great job. You know, as we did vocals, we pushed him and helped him, and you know, it's really the first time he sang. You know, other than demos, you know, the first time he sang lead on an actual album that was going to come out. You know, he was a little insecure about it, but we kept, you know, building him up and helping him, and in the end, he did a tremendous job. Great vocals.
He sounded great on that record, yeah.
And I think that'd be part of the reason why we never did the reunion, because, you know, here it is, you know, 20 years later, voices change, and, you know, he hasn't been singing like that. And I think maybe it might have been really hard for him to hit those notes, even detuned, you know. I mean, this is my own thoughts. You know, I couldn't imagine why he wouldn't want to do this, because really, you know, he was always a sideman in bands, and this was the only thing that it was his band, and he had equity in it, and this was his thing. And I didn't understand why he wouldn't do this again, because Blue Murder was really much bigger than John Sykes as an artist. You know, worldwide, everybody knows Blue Murder. I mean, worldwide, everyone knows John Sykes, but they don't know his work. They know his work from Whitesnake and Blue Murder mostly. So, you know, me and Tony still that's why when we did this nuke band Rated X, it sort of sounds like Blue Murder with Joel and Turner singing, you know? Mm-hmm. Except we didn't have the $450,000 budget to make it sound like that, you know, because there are no budgets like that anymore.
No.
But for what we had, I think a tremendous job. The Rated X record sounds great, you know, and it does have that Blue Murder vibe, as I put it, you know.
And then what sort of changed between the first and second record with Blue Murder? You know, obviously time went on, and
well, me and Tony left. Well, I left. There was a disagreement with John, and basically, you know, after that first record failed, John, you know, we were all in such shock that it failed. I mean, it didn't fail. I mean, today that would have been a huge record, but we sold like 160, 170,000, and 50,000 in Japan or more. You know, so compared to all the big bands, you know, selling millions, it was a failure. And, you know, John went into like shock, as we all did. I would have bet my house on the fact that record was going to go huge, you know. It's a good thing I didn't. So he sort of fell into a shock mode and didn't do anything for months. In that time period, I was screwing around with some Vanilla Fudge stuff. We had a live record we were releasing on Rhino. We were planning to do maybe a couple of gigs here and there. And, you know, John didn't like, you know, the fact that I was looking at other things. He said, you know, you either got to be committed or not. So, I mean, there was nothing to be committed to because we were set up for success. We weren't set up for failure. You know, Tony was on a salary. I wasn't on a salary because I was, you know, I had money, and I always felt that this thing was going to be huge. So I just had my percentages, you know.
Yeah.
And when it didn't go, so I was on no salary. So I was out there, you know, doing clinics and doing other things, making money. And you know, John wanted a commitment when he started thinking. And so he basically said, "Well, then, you know, I'll do this without you or something." It was like a split, you know. I didn't really remember what happened. After he went to a bunch of drummers to try and play on the record, he had Mike Stone as a producer. Mike ended up calling me and saying, "Look, we really need you to come back and play on this Blue Murder record." So I went back and played on it as a session guy. I got paid from Geffen Records on sessions, which actually I got paid well. And I went in and I did maybe, I think, 9 of the 11 songs or something like that. Matter of fact, I just bought one of those songs on YouTube because I really always liked that song. And I just bought it, and it's on iTunes. And awesome. I mean, it's really awesome. We now John had built a studio in his house. I basically went in there and helped him get the drum sound together. I had him put up curtains and do different things to help get the drum sound. So I went in there, and then we did that album, and then when it came out, Tony had left. Because Tony was heavy-duty drug addict at one point, you know, acid, cocaine, heroin, but drank. I mean, he was a mess. And then right after he left, he straightened out. I went to rehab, but he's been straight ever since. That was 1992.
Oh, that's great. Good for him.
Yeah, good for him, right? And you know, just the kind of guy you'd be on the road and you say, "Yeah, you want some acid?" No, give it to Tony. You want some coke? No, give it to Tony. You want some, you know, whatever it is, mescaline? No, Tony will take it. You know, you want a hit of Jägermeister? No, give it to Tony. You know, he would take everything. But now he's been straight now for, you know, like over 20 years. He did great. So he left, and then John got Marco Mendoza, brought him in the business. Marco was a jazz bass player. So he brought him in, and then he had this drummer named Tommy came in. And then he did a quick tour of America. And because we were so big in Japan, Blue Murder was so big in Japan, when we went there on that first tour, we had we drew 12,000 people.
That's incredible.
To the gigs. Because it was the names in the band coupled with the songs, but the names in the band, I mean, before the We even went over there with the big magazine, Burn magazine, was doing like, all time the greatest trios of rock. And you had the Cream, and you had Jimi Hendrix, and Beck, Bogert, and Appice, in the same article as, the greatest trios of all time. And here's the new trio of today. There's Blue Murder, and I was in BBA, and I was in Blue Murder, So it's pretty cool. So the fact, BBA was huge over there, Rod Stewart was huge over there, so my name was huge over there. And Sykes' name was big there because of Whitesnake, and Tony was big there from the Firm. So when we went there together, the Japanese, they loved the historical thing, So we were huge. When Sykes went over there with the other version of Blue Murder, it did okay, but it didn't do as good as our version, because that was the original. And then eventually people were saying, this isn't Blue Murder, this is not Blue Murder, this is John Sykes' band. So then he changed all his project names over in Japan after he did a Blue Murder live CD in Japan, and it didn't do that good. Then he just changed it to John Sykes and just called it Sykes. And then he went over and he did okay. He was drawing a couple of thousand people in the market, Through the 90s, he had a whole career just in Japan. And that's all John did. And then from 2000 on, I was trying to get him to do a Blue Murder reunion, and I just never can get him to do it.
That's too bad. Yeah, that first record was it was magic. It really was.
It was magic. It was.
And then jumping ahead, I guess about a decade or so, in the early 2000s, you did a couple records with Pat Travers. How did you guys start working together?
Well, I had done a record with Derringer and Bogert. So it was called Derringer, Bogert, and Appice for SPV in Europe, So basically, the producer who produced that, he basically, he came up to me and said, SPV wants to do another record, but they don't want to do Derringer because when we did it with Rick, his wife is Christian and Rick was Christian also, and they started writing Christian lyrics. And they didn't want those kind of lyrics. They wanted real rock and roll things. So he said, is there anyone else that you'd like to work with? So, I'd seen Pat around, I jammed with him a couple of times when he came up to wherever I was, So I basically, I suggested Pat. So we got a hold of Pat. Pat said, yeah, I'd love to do it. So he was coming out to LA for the NAMM show, and we kept him out there. We had a budget, and we kept him out there, and we recorded that Travers Appice record, And then it came out great. And Pat was saying at the time, this is the best record I've done in years, It's an amazing record. And we did it in like 10 days.
That's incredible.
So we really caught all the energy. I mean, he was in and gone in 2 weeks. We wrote the songs, we recorded them in 10 days, and he was gone. Then we mixed them. I had Pat Regan mix it. And we recorded analog, and, it just sounded great. And, in Europe it did well. Over here, the SPV had no distributing, so it didn't do much over here. But in Europe it did well. And we went to Europe and did a 30-day tour, actually. And it was fun, it was fun playing with Pat. Then Cleopatra offered me another deal with Pat, where they wanted to have us re-record some of the songs that we're known for. So we went in and then do 4 originals. So we did 4 new songs. And then we did over songs like Evil from Cactus. We did Boom Boom, Out Goes the Lights. We did Crash and Burn. We did Snorting Whiskey. Then we did Living Alone. We did a heavy version of Do You Think I'm Sexy? So that came out on Cleopatra and with 4 originals. So that, that did okay. And it's still out there. You can still buy that, And, every once in a while we do stuff. I just played with Pat over the weekend for a benefit. And we have this...
Oh, like just now?
Yeah, on Saturday.
Oh, that's hilarious.
Yeah, he flew up from Florida. We're always in touch. And I just released on my label, Rocker Records, Travers Appice Live in Europe. Somebody sent me a CD from Europe. It was like, recorded. I don't know how they recorded it, but it sounded damn good. And it kicked ass. I mean, it really kicked ass. When I started Rocker Records, now part of the idea was to put out stuff that fans don't have that they might like. So so I released stuff that me and Tim Bogert did in the studio. I released Travers Appice Live, Cactus Live in the USA, Cactus Live in Japan, Cactus Live DVD in Japan, coupled with a CD set, and then lately the latest one, Drum Wars Live. a lot of live stuff, you know. We're going to release a new Cactus EP next year. We're finishing that up. I got to do percussion on that and then mix it. And so I'm hoping to be out by April. We're working on a year tour for Cactus, and you know, I'm sure we'll do some American dates as well. You know, so I work with Pat. I love Pat. He's one of my favorite guitar player. I mean, he's the nicest guy. He doesn't have that guitar player attitude. You know, he's a really nice guy. And now we're talking about doing another thing together. He has this great idea. He said, look, my wife listens a lot to the 40 station on Sirius. They play all this 40s big band stuff. He said, I would love to do something with me and you, doing like a big band album, but instead of the horns and everything, we'll do it with guitars, like a guitar orchestra, playing big band stuff, where, you know, so he said, yeah, that's the idea. I said, that's a cool idea. He said, you know, we could do the drum breaks like they used to do with Gene Krupa and Buddy Rich and all those, Louis Bellson and all that stuff. He said, and I know you could do all that stuff. I said, yeah, I can do all that stuff. He said, it would be a great follow-up to our other albums. I said, yeah. So he said, you know what, I'm going to go in the studio next week. I'm going to put down a couple of ideas, and I'll send it to you, and you can put down drums, and then we'll actually have a demo. So when we're talking to labels, we can say, hey, this is it. Not just describe it. We can actually play it for them. I said, okay, let's do that. So we're going to do that. So it'll be like Travis Appice plays big band. You know?
That's awesome. That sounds like a really cool idea. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, it does sound good. Because, you know, you look at Rod Stewart. Rod Stewart did all the big band stuff.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and especially you look at things like, say, Family Guy, right, that are still keeping that sound alive. Right, so that could probably work to your benefit, too.
Yeah. So it's all good. So right now I'm having fun. I'm able to play with all these different bands. Not locked into, like one time when I was playing with KGB with Mike Bloomfield, I was signed to MCA Records. Richie Blackmore asked me to join Rainbow when Ronnie joined Rainbow. I couldn't do it because I was signed to MCA, so they got Cozy. See, that's the thing about Cozy. He was never signed to the labels. You know, he was a free agent. I was always involved in being signed to the label, you know, so I couldn't do anything else. But now...
that would have been hilarious to have you and Joe Lynn Turner have hooked up in the early 80s as members of Rainbow, eh?
Well, funny enough, Bobby Rondinelli played with him, and he was one of my students. They opened up for us with Ted. We played gigs, we were playing arenas with Ted, and Rainbow opened up for us before they... Just as that big hit was starting to happen, that Stone Cold was starting to happen. But they weren't a headliner yet, you know? So that was funny. Bobby Rondinelli was playing, and he had the gong set up like me, he looked like me, played very similar to me in those days. So it was just funny. You know, just as when I didn't play with Jeff, he got Cozy. It's like I started saying Cozy is my professional replacement here, which, what the fuck, you know? So, and then it ended up being my brother.
Pretty much.
Because my brother tells a different story, but, you know, my story is when Black Sabbath needed a drummer, they called my publicist who worked for Warner Brothers at the time, and they asked them if they knew she was my publicist, to see if I would be interested in joining them. At the time, Black Sabbath was playing one night in the arena, 1980. I was with Rod Stewart. We were playing 5 nights in the arena, so it was sort of like, well, what should I do? You know? So I said, no, I don't think I could do it now. You know, so then somehow I got my brother. Vinny tells a different story, but that's my side of it, you know.
Well, it's funny because I'm supposed to talk to him in a few weeks, so I'm going to ask him about that and see what he says.
Oh, yeah, I know what he'll say. He'll say that I only heard the Axis record and he liked what he did, but I think the Axis record was given to him by my publicist.
Oh.
I think, you know, but so anyway, it's funny how that happened, but I do remember the call from my publicist telling me that, you know. A little after that, Vinny was asked to join, you know, maybe it was like 79 or 80, just before he joined Sabbath. Vinny was asked to join Ozzy Osbourne's new band. That's before they had a record out. And Vinny asked me about it. I said, forget about it. I was with Ozzy at the Rainbow, you know, the Rainbow Bar and Grill in L.A. Mm-hmm. And I was talking to Ozzy, and I turned around to talk to somebody else, and when I turned back to Ozzy, his face was in a bowl of spaghetti. Okay? So I said to Vinny, this guy can't even hold his head up to eat it. I was sitting next to him, his head is in a bowl of spaghetti. I mean, come on. You want to play with this guy? He's not going to be able to do nothing. I was wrong. So Vinny didn't, Vinny told him no. And then they went on, they got Lee Kurzlick, and they did that first album. And Vinny, would have got screwed big time like Bob and Lee got screwed big time. They all got screwed on that deal. And basically, the funny thing is, all the bands and musicians, we were all traveling in one clique, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I traveled it was in that clique of, the Deep Purple, White Snake, but also it was the English, it was all originated from the English stuff, From, like when my clique was, it went from, Vanilla Fudge to Led Zeppelin to Jeff Beck, Rod Stewart, that whole clique. And then my other heavier side went from the Ozzy to the Black Sabbath to the Rainbow. So it was all in that same clique of musicians where it started from. A lot of it started from Vanilla Fudge, actually. If you put up Vanilla Fudge on the top there, you had me coming off joining Cactus into, we took Led Zeppelin on the first tour, we took Deep Purple on the first tour. So then that, from Deep Purple and Led Zeppelin, all these other things branched off. So it's really, really funny, that whole thing happened, It didn't go from like a Jimi Hendrix family tree, There was a Vanilla Fudge, the Deep Purple, or Led Zeppelin. You can pretty much, with that whole, right there, you can have the whole thing. I would say Vanilla Fudge and the Yardbirds back to back, side by side. Okay? So those two trees, they branch out to create the whole rock scene that was happening.
It's incredible. Someone listening to this, I'm sure, will probably branch that out and will actually see this. But you're right, though. You take all the members and what they did and just sort of how it ballooned out into rock. Like, it's incredible. It really is.
Yeah, it is, basically starts up there with the, with the Beatles but really it didn't. If you take like Vanilla Fudge and you look at people that came from the band and people that opened up for the band, and then you take the Yardbirds, the same thing, and you'll get a lot of all the big bands that were big came out of that stuff. You got Vanilla Fudge, you got Deep Purple and Led Zeppelin, just those two bands. Plus we had Frank Zappa, we had Alice Cooper open for us, If you take all those opening bands and just branch out on them, you have the whole thing. Then you get into Cactus that influenced, rather than a family tree of where people came out of, you do a family tree of influences. It would really be an interesting family tree.
Next time you do your next book, you've got to find someone who can actually map all this out. It'll probably take them a month to actually sit down and sift through this.
Yeah. Actually, it's not a bad idea.
Jumping ahead to a couple of years ago, another one of my favorite records you were involved with was Michael Schenker's Temple of Rock. How'd you get involved with that one?
Michael is endorsed by Dean Guitars, and the owner of Dean Guitars, Elliot Rubinson, is a bass player from New York that's always wanted to be a rock star. So I call him the backdoor rock star, because what he does now, he goes out and plays with his endorsers in the band. He leaves the music business of Dean Guitars and D drums, and he goes and plays with the band. So he was going to do this tour with Michael, and he got me on the tour, and I was playing D drums on the tour, and so it was a D drum and Dean guitar tour, basically. Everybody on the tour played those instruments. So I did one tour with Michael, a summer tour in 2010. And we went to South America also the following March. And then Michael did that album. And Michael Voss, who was the engineer producer on that record, called me and said, look, I'd love for you to play on tracks. So I said, okay. So I made him a deal. I charged him very little money. I said, if I ever do another Guitar Zeus record, which he didn't talk about, I said, if I ever did another Guitar Zeus record, I want Michael to play on it. And he said, okay. So I went in and did the tracks in Las Vegas at the time when I was doing these two King Cobra albums. And that was it. They sent me the tracks, I just played on them.
Oh, okay. So since you brought it up, let's discuss Guitar Zeus, something I've heard of. I really don't know much about the band. Tell me about this band.
No, you got to go on YouTube or somewhere, iTunes, and look up Conquering Heroes Guitar Zeus. It was a series I did. I had a basic band. It was me, Tony Franklin, and a guy named Kelly Keeling, who was also on that second Blue Murder record.
Yep, that's right.
Okay, he's a great singer, great songwriter. So I had this idea. I was working with Jeff Watson, Bob Daisley, and Joel Intern in a group called Mother's Army.
Right.
And I noticed that Jeff Watson, he had came out of Night Ranger, and Shrapnel offered him a $50,000 record deal. I said, you know, freaking guitar players, man. They come out of a band, and they got handed to them on a silver platter, a big record deal with big advance and everything. And you're a freaking drummer, you know, because I had done that 1982 solo album, you know, and I wanted to do another one, and it was like pulling teeth to try and get a record deal, you know, as a drummer. So I said, maybe I should do a guitar album, you know, I'll call it Guitar Gods or something, you know. So I was goofing, you know, I was kidding around with Jeff Watson or whoever I was talking to. You know, when you go to sleep at night and your brain starts wandering, started thinking about it. And we were thinking of calling out Zeus, which we didn't. We ended up calling Mother's Army. So we were already calling it Mother's Army. So I had that Zeus thing in the back of my head. So I said, yeah, that's not a bad idea, man. If I can do an album of some great guitar players and call it Guitar Zeus, that's even cooler. So from then on, that was like 1991 or 2, I started trying to organize it. So when I did a few clinics, I ran into Brian May at one clinic, and I asked him if he'd play on it. He said, I would gladly play on it. I ran into Ted Nugent. He said he would play on it. So with those two guys committed to saying they would play on it, I tried to get a deal. It took me 2 years to find a manager that could actually put a deal together. And I finally found this guy, Warren Wyatt, and he put the deal together in Japan. And he got me a 140th record deal to do this. So now I needed a partner to run with Kelly. I ran into him at a party at the Hard Rock in LA. He said, you know, come over to my house anytime. I'll show you the kind of songs I write. I went over and saw Kelly, and this guy was like a fucking waterfall of material. He was just a great writer and a great singer, but he wrote too much. You know, his songs had too much on it. I had to like be like a butcher and cut out the fat. So I said, all right, so I was going to use him. I already knew I wanted to use Tony. And this is like 1995 now we're in. I was playing with Edgar Winter, and I stopped playing with Edgar to go do this.
Oh, I didn't know you played with Edgar Winter. Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah, I played with Edgar from 92 to 90, almost 95. It was great, a lot of fun.
Did you guys do any records together, or was it just touring?
No, never recorded, unfortunately. But I did give Edgar on my Guitar Zeus record, singing. So what I did was, I got a hold of Kelly. He was living in the Valley at the time, and we started writing songs. We put them on a 4-track. And then I already had the record deal. I got a hold of Tony, and I paid him really well. I mean, those days, you know, you had 140 grand to work with. I hired Phil Caffel, who was a producer. He produced No Doubt. Went to a studio, analog studio. We recorded everything. I probably spent $100,000 on the record. But so the idea was, I got Ted Nugent on there first, after we did the songs. And the songs were like Soundgarden meets Blue Murder meets the Beatles. That was the idea. Me and Tony together as the rhythm section, it sounded like Blue Murder. Kelly played guitar, we had a heavy guitar. And it sounded very heavy, very, you know, detuned and weird. We had weird tunings and stuff going on. And if you listen to that stuff now, it still sounds current. And we did it in 95. One of our songs was called Black White House. And the lyrics were, nobody knew who's running the White House is painted all black now, you'd think who would mind, right? That was 1995, okay? Does it strike a note now?
Just a bit,
Yeah?
Yep, just a bit.
Okay. Anyway, so we did that, so I said, well, look, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get Ted Nugent on there, because a lot of guitar players respect him. I already got them, I'm going to get Brian. So I'll tell guys I'm getting Brian. Then I'm also, hot at the time was King's X. So those guys wanted to sing. So I got Doug to sing on a record, on a song. And then I got Ty to play a guitar on one. So when I would call people, I would say, look, I got Ted Nugent, Brian May, Ty Tabor, and Doug from King's X. And that sucked other people in. Next thing Slash said he would do it. So I got Slash. So after I got Doug on a song, Yngwie told Kelly was working with Yngwie, that he wanted to do it. He wanted to be on the song with Doug. Okay? So that was cool. Then I talked to Mick Mars, and he said, so I had Edgar on a song singing. So Mick Mars said, I always wanted Edgar. So I put Mick Mars on with Edgar. You know? Then I got Leslie West, I got Steve Morse, I got everybody. You know, all the cool guitar players. I got Paul Gilbert, Leslie West. So I had 13 songs on the first album. So I had 13 different guitar players. Dweezil Zappa, all that. Then I did number 2, which we got $200,000 now because the first album did really well. I sold over 100,000 units around the world. Next album, I had gotten Richie Sambora, Zach Wilde. I got Ted Nugent again. I got Dweezil again, Ty Tabor again. Even got Steven Seagal to play guitar, and I got Seymour Duncan and Seymour and Steven Seagal on the same track, right? And then I got Stevie Salas. I got John McEnroe to play rhythm guitar. It was crazy. Then I did a guitar.
I have to seek this out now. This just sounds too cool.
Yeah, I did Guitars Japan.
Yeah, I'd heard of it, never ever listened to it.
Oh, you gotta listen to it. It's really good stuff. Some of the best stuff. If you like Blue Murder, these are some of the best things I've ever done, I think.
And then, so you did 2. Are you looking to do a 3rd, or have you done?
Well, I did Guitars Japan, also, which had all Japanese guitar players on it, and then I did Guitars Korea, also. So I did 4. It's like a series, and it was released all around the world. I probably ended up selling close to 150, 180,000 units of it worldwide, over the years. Still out now. It's on Fuel Records now, Fuel 2000. And you can go to iTunes and sample them. Look under Conquering Heroes Guitars. I think it's under my name.
Oh, okay. Do you have plans to do another record and keep that going?
I'd like to, but there's no budgets, man. I mean, I had to pay these guys. Some of them did me favors. I still owe favors back. But I had to pay $2,000, $2,500 a piece for them to go in and play a 4-minute solo. So it was not easy budget-wise, and I paid everybody well. If I did it now, it would be very cheap. If I can get $60,000 to do one, I can do one, but it's very, very hard to come up with $60,000 budget, for rock, unless you're AC/DC.
That's incredible. Yeah, as soon as we get off here, I'm going to check it out. That's so cool. I mean, just for you to sit there and list off a name, it's like, oh, they're one of my favorite guitar players. Oh, they're one of my favorite guitar players. Oh, it's just that's just unreal. So before we talk about your latest band, Rated X, I'm curious, so what's your drum setup like now for live and in the studio?
It's pretty much the same. I do 224-inch by 14 bass drums. Oh, here, who put this out? Turned it up, Carmine Appice Essentials. It's supposed to be Cleopatra. No, I don't know who did this. Yeah, it looks like Cleopatra. I got all these funny things on iTunes I don't even know about. Carmine Appice and Friends did. Yeah, this must be Cleopatra.
Do you get that a lot? Like, do you get a bunch of stuff coming out that you literally have no clue about?
Well, yeah, sometimes. I mean, like this, I did a deal with Fuel Records, They bought 13 albums of mine that were not released, that were not, like you couldn't get Guitar Zeus in America. So they bought Guitar Zeus, put it out as a double album, Conquering Heroes, Carmine Appice Guitar Zeus. And then, through all they took a couple of things. They did, Carmine Appice Classics. Now this one's called Carmine Appice and Friends, which has some different songs on, but they're all on one CD. It's like 18 songs on one CD, But, I get royalties and stuff from it. But sometimes you let them do that. It's fine, let them do that. Yeah, but there are some things that come out, like there was a Cactus live album that came out. Somebody took the soundtrack from our DVD that we did a few years ago and released it, unlicensed in Europe. And I was signing these things all over Europe and signing them all over Japan and stuff. I didn't know where they came from. And then I found out, and then the guy ended up, I knew the guy. I called him, and I had a deal going in Europe, the same kind of catalog deal. And this freaking guy, he must have sold him the rights without having the rights, So I ended up getting paid the royalties that were due for that time period. But they were supposed to be paying royalties onward, going forward. I haven't heard from either one of them. Now the other catalog deal is gone, and it's expired. And this guy goes to show you, like he had the same 13 titles that Fuel had. Fuel released all the titles. He recouped my advance and actually got royalties. A good amount, thousands of dollars in royalties. The same company over there had the same catalog. They didn't release all the stuff. They're unrecouped, and the deal is up. A good job. These guys didn't. So now I got all those albums back, and now I'm looking for another label over there to to distribute it all.
Just jumping back to the gear thing, what drums are you playing?
So I use two 24 by 14 bass drums, 12 by 8, 13 by 9 front rack toms, a 16 by 16 and an 18 by 18 floor drum. I have a Carmine signature snare, which is made of brass. It's a 5-inch signature snare. I use a Korg wave drum, which is sort of an electronic drum. I have a Morley wah-wah on my snare drum, which I've been using for years and years. I have Istanbul Mehmet cymbals. They're called Carmine realistic rock cymbals. They're named after my drum book. And those are 14-inch hi-hats, an 18-inch crash, medium crash, 20-inch medium crash, a 22-inch heavy ride, 18-inch China, custom China, realistic rock China. Then I use this 15-inch shade cymbal, which is a unique sort of accessory sounding cymbal. I use this really unique kind of throne, seat, which has like a canal down the middle, which is great for your spine, for your back and support, called a Carmichael drum throne. And that's really cool too. So, and then I use Vic Firth sticks, signature model. I have 2 tips on them, and I use Evans drum heads. Pretty much my setup.
Do you do anything like bells or gongs or chimes or anything like that?
Well, I used to have the gongs, but with today's market the way it is, you can't take that stuff around with you.
Yeah.
I mean, in the 80s, I had the gongs. I wouldn't leave L.A. unless I had my truck with my riser, my gong, my stage lights, everything. I had a monitor system. I used to take all that. Now, you do a lot of fly-ins, so you get whatever gear is there. I try and get as close to, unless you're on a tour. The Michael Schenker tour, we had my drums. So when we do like a run in the Northwest with Vanilla Fudge or Cactus or Drum Wars, we take our drums. You don't take a big truck anymore. It's just too expensive.
Yeah, oh, for sure.
No.
So speaking of touring, do you have any rituals or anything you do on tour to warm up, or things you've learned over the years that give you sort of longevity as a tour goes on?
Sleep. No, really. Trying to eat good and sleep. At my age, that's what you have to do. I mean, I'm like I should be a retired senior by now. But I still love the playing and stuff. So, now it's a different thing. Whenever I play now, I end up the next day aching, body aches because of my age, But I still enjoy the playing. It doesn't matter when I'm playing. It's always the next day. It's always put the ice on the legs, put the ice on the back,
You guys don't do like 5 shows in 5 days anymore, right? Do you guys sort of space things out a little bit more?
Sometimes. I mean, like when we were doing this Metal All-Stars tour, they had 14 shows in one day, 14 shows in a row.
That's wow.
But, it's not like you're playing an hour and a half. My part would have been 5 or 6 songs.
Oh, okay. That's more reasonable.
It's not bad, but still, I mean, just traveling 14 days in a row, it's too much. So they're rescheduling that. I told the org ended up being the music director on it. I said, look, let's do 4 in a row and then take a day off. I mean, you're going to kill everybody on this tour.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, nobody can keep that kind of pace up and have the energy to play. It's just too much. I mean, with Cactus, Vanilla Fudge, we did 4 in a row, had a day or 2 off. It was fine. We just went, last year we did a lot of work. The Vanilla Fudge went to Europe. Most we ever did was 4 in a row, and a day off, then 2 in a row, and a day off, then 3 in a row, and a day off, then maybe 4 in a row. And we did a summer tour. One of the things was 4 in a row. But mostly was like 2 or 3 in a row, the most. So we try and keep it at that. And I also try and keep, for me, I don't like being out more than 2.5, 3 weeks at a time.
Yeah, it just starts to get you at that point.
Yeah, I mean, my age is so like this Metal All Stars tour is 5 weeks. I was going to do half of it. My brother Vinny will do the other half. And then we were going to sell Drum Wars merchandise, and we released a Drum Wars CD over there. And
well, let's talk about that project.
Yeah.
How did Drum Wars come to be?
Well, Drum Wars has been going for years. Started out as a clinic tour in '88, and then we had a lot of fun. And then we did a couple more of those, and then by 1994, 95, I had a video construction company. And I said, let's do a Drum Wars video for fun, and let's make it like we battle for the name of Appice or Appice, And then at the end, my older brother will up and say that, but it's a peach. You know? You know what I mean? So we made it like a comedy kind of video. So basically, we went on from there. So then we released that, it did well. And then after we did like promotions for that video, we said, hey, this is fun, we should try and do a show. So that was like maybe 1998. So we never really got anything going. And then I got busy and Vinny got busy. And then when Ronnie died, because in 2006 or 7, maybe 2008, we re-released the video as a DVD and we added more footage. We got a video deal, DVD deal for it. And then we started thinking about doing the show. And it wasn't until Ronnie died that Vinny was left with nothing to do. And we'd been talking about doing this. And then he joined Heaven and Hell. So we did it starting in 2011. We did an experiment as a clinic and we did it as a show. In both markets, it worked great. So then that was 2011. So we did a couple of more shows then. And then in 2012, we started really doing more shows. But not until we did this European tour in 2012. We did 20 shows in a row that we really developed it into a show. And then 2013, we continued doing that. We went to Europe, we did shows here. This year we did a bunch of shows. And then at the end of June, we played the Iridium and they put all this stuff live. And then when I heard it, I had my label, and I said, you know what, we'll buy that from you, the recording, and we'll put it together and we'll, fix it, what needs to be fixed and edit and blah, blah, blah. And we'll put out a Drum Wars Live because really we were going to do a studio album, but this is like a live show, it's really a live thing. So I thought it would be better to capture the first recording live than studio because that's what it is. We even have a bit of comedy in there, Joe Benson from Kiss in LA has a distinct voice. He handled it like one of those wrestlers. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for Drum Wars, Then he had weighing in at 175 pounds. Yeah, right, he goes, From Black Sabbath, Vanilla Appice. And then for me, it's weighing in at 365 pounds. Oh my God, using double drums to burn more calories. Walk out with a pillow on my belly, And then I take the pillow out and then we show I'm not really 375. And then I get behind the drums and we both start and we play with the Mob Rules from Sabbath. We play it together. So then the tour the whole album goes like that. But it's a good 90-minute show. We got about an hour and 5 minutes on the CD. So it works good. What
tracks did you do? Is there a lot of solos or a lot of songs you guys have played over the years? Or?
Well, there's some solos, but there's songs. Yeah, we play Mob Rules. We play, Vinny plays Holy Diver and We Rock. I play Bark at the Moon and heavy version of Do You Think I'm Sexy I did with Pat. And both of us play Stand Up and Shout. That goes into Heaven and Hell, a little bit of the whoa, 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 whoa. The audience sings along with us. And we both do Crazy Train. And normally we do Paranoid. And then in between that, we have a song called Drum Wars Part 1. And there's a Drum Wars Part 2. And then there's a goof on the Flintstones TV show where we get the audience singing the theme song. And then we play the rhythm of the theme song on the tom-toms and turn that into like a little drum piece.
Oh, that's so cool.
But we get the audience involved quite a bit, singing like Do You Think I'm Sexy? We get them sing that, whoa, they sing that, the audience sings that. We'll get them to yell out, Bark at the Moon, We Rock. So we get them all involved, So it's a regular concert, but it's just based around drums.
Who are the other players on that?
Well, on that is this guy named Jim Crean, who's from upstate New York. He's been there's a legendary guy from up that area, like Tallis and all that. He's he's in the Buffalo Hall of Fame, Music Hall of Fame and stuff up there. And then we got this guy Ethan Brush, who's playing guitar, who's got a solo album out on my legs. Right now he's opening up for Jakey Lee on Jakey Lee's tour.
Oh, that's incredible.
Yeah, and then we have this bass player named James Caputo, who's from New York. He's just a great bass player, and he works as also a tour manager for Vanilla Fudge and played with us a couple of times. And he's a great bass player, so he's playing bass. And he's been playing with the Drum Wars stuff ever since we started playing the East Coast. I used him on the Drum Wars shows.
That's incredible. I hope this really takes off. It sounds so cool.
It is very cool, and like it's the Gene Krupa Buddy Rich drum battles that they used to do in the 40s. They did it to jazz. We're doing it to rock and heavy metal. And we're brothers, so we can come out and say stuff like, And Vinny will do a solo, I'll come out, and Vinny Appice on drums, and people applaud. I go, I taught him everything he knows. And then he'll say, that's not what your mother would say, you know. So, you know, we can goof off like that because we're brothers, you know. We're the only rock star brother drummers to make it to the heights that we've made it in the history of rock music. And the articles are good, you know, saying between the two of us, we've paved the way for other bands, and we sort of helped carve rock music the way it is today. You know, it's all good. It's all good, you know.
So the other big thing we're looking at is a new Rated X record. Tell me, sort of, obviously you've worked with, you know, Joe and especially Tony before. How did this whole band come together?
Well, it was the idea of Frontiers Records. Serafino, he wanted to put a band together and have Joe as the singer, and Joe was the first one. He asked about it, and then he asked me second. And once I got involved, I said, okay. Then Joe realized that they were serious. So then me and Joe started talking, and then it was originally going to be Pat Travers and Rudy Sarzo. And then Pat was releasing some records on Frontiers and said, look, you know, I think I might be in competition with myself if I did this.
Yeah.
So I'm going to have to bow out. And then Rudy got busy doing some other stuff. We ended up saying, well, who now? So I definitely wanted Tony, because Tony was my favorite bass player to play with. So we brought Tony, was okay with it. And then we went through a series of guitar players. You know, we had Bruce Kulick from Kiss and Jeff Watson, and it just didn't work out for a lot of different reasons. And then Joe recommended Carl Cochran. He says, not a big name, but he did play with Ace Frehley. He wrote some songs for Kiss's last album. And he played with Sebastian Bach, so some people know him. In Jersey, he had a bit of a name. So we brought Carl in. 11 songs into it, Carl had a stroke. And we never played in the same room, ever, any of us, for this record. It was all done by the internet. So we had bass, drums, vocals, needed the guitar. So after 7 tracks, Carl had the stroke, and we brought in these other guys from Europe, finished the album. We had done all the videos and the promotion shots and the EPK. We did everything already with Carl, so we needed to, leave his name and everything on there. So we left it on there.
Right.
And, and we've been promoting it, ever since. And, to me, it sounds, as I said before, like Blue Murder with Joel and Turner singing. The up-tempo songs sound like Blue Murder-ish, and the big epics sound like Irish, but they're also little tastes of Deep Purple and Rainbow and, and 70s stuff,
Yeah,
So,
yeah, it's very, very 70s, 80s rock with a bit of a modern twist to it.
Yeah.
How's Carl's progress been since he had the stroke?
Well, he's talking a bit more now, and his right hand is still not moving as much. He's walking now with a cane. He's walking without a cane, actually, also. We just did another benefit for him on Saturday. That's when I played with Pat. There was a benefit for Carl, because we're trying to raise enough money for him to get this. It's a certain machine that hooks onto your arm, and somehow it reads your brain waves on what you want your arm to do, and it assists in moving the arm. It gets the muscles back working, So
That's incredible.
yeah, but it's so sad because this guy
is the prognosis.
You don't know. It's really you don't really know until it starts happening. You don't know what's going to happen. He's saying we're going to come back. We're going to come back. But nobody really knows until that's happening. He's getting better. He's better than he was a few months ago. But I don't know how long the progress lasts. Or does it keep going, or is there a point where it slows down? So it's really sad because before that happened, he had told me, well, I'm 50 years old and I'm finally getting to get some success in my career. He was also playing with Flavor Flav. He had a band with him. I saw him the night before he had the stroke. He did 2 shows sold out at the Iridium, and it was awesome. I was visualizing Carl on stage with Tony, how cool it was going to be, because not only a great guitarist, he was a good singer too. And then the next 12 hours later, he was in the hospital.
Oh my goodness, Carmine, that's unbelievable. I feel so sorry for you guys. I just took a look at the time. I see we're literally out of time right now. So, Carmine, thank you so much for taking the time to do this. I know we've had to do this over 2 sessions, and I want to thank you for, going through your history. There's been a lot of great stories, and, I just want to say personally, you've been a huge inspiration. As you can tell, I'm a big fan of your work. So, thank you for taking the time to to do this.
Well, thank you very much.
All right. I'll let you go. Best of luck with Drum Wars and the new Rated X album, and I hope to catch you guys on the road soon.
Okay, you got it.
All right. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
That's my brother, Carmine